Good afternoon. I remember there's some days I talk about more esoteric things. Maybe I'll share with you what's happening to me since awakening. Maybe I'll share some of the steps along the way. And then sometimes I talk about just preparation, things that you can begin to do early on. And today will be one of those days that I'm going to share with you my process and something that I had to work on that is doable at any stage any stage that you are along your journey. Okay, so I remember it's based on when I think of something that I want to share, it's kind of inspired, and I will stop what I'm doing. It usually happens right over there when I'm sitting for meditation, and it usually happens during that time or even in a dream. And in the dream, I have my iPad nearby, and I put the sharing, put the name of the teaching of the sharing that I'd like to work on sooner or later. And otherwise, I try to think when I'm dreaming, remember that. Of course, I've forgotten it. So I've developed this habit. And it's been a helpful habit. So, as I was saying, at some point, some memory, something in my past comes back from the most unlikely source, and I'm going way back to my freshman English class at University of Hawaii in 1966, my freshman year of university, and I had a old, at least at that time. She's probably younger than I am now at that time, but she's not an old teacher. And she'd talk about our writing skills, because that's what freshman English basically focused on, is how to write, because it becomes so important in the rest of your university career. And so few of us really came prepared from our high schools to do academic writing, at least. But I remember saying, I can cut out the dead wood. Cut out the dead wood. And this state I can hear her right now as I'm doing my poor imitation of her. And by dead wood, she meant clutter. We maybe we have to do a 500-word essay. So we tend to just load it up, really say nothing, but just use more words to accomplish that fact. And what she was teaching us is that you're clear of what you want to communicate. That's first. And then secondly, you learn to eliminate that which distracts. And that's the perfect segue into what I wanted to share, is clear the clutter. Clear the clutter. See, I could clear the clutter, and you have to cut to clear. So I had cutter, kind of a shorthand to nowhere. But anyway, clear the clutter. And because I was that type of, I became a jhana yogi. Of the 4 yogic paths, the one that was most natural for me was the path of wisdom, which included using my mind. And This message from my old English professor became more and more meaningful when I was at this stage of life, probably the last 40 years, where I wanted to accumulate wisdom while eliminating everything else that didn't directly contribute, enhance, that confirm that knowledge. So my mind was going through a constant state of clearing. And I developed a process which I'll share with you first. Indiscriminate gathering. And I use the word indiscriminate because I didn't discriminate. It didn't have to come from an academic source. It didn't have to come from the work of a gifted writer. It didn't have to come from the classics. It didn't have to come from philosophy. It didn't have to come from... Anyway, the body of knowledge. It could be as simple as an article in the paper. It could be even a TV commercial. Even a TV commercial might have things worth saving that would contribute to this evolution of information to wisdom. So indiscriminate gathering. And this is my mind was cluttered. This is the clutter that I'm talking about. But there's a time, at least for me, there was a time in my process where I just accumulated. I wasn't even concerned about eliminating, clearing. I just wanted to gather. And born with an innate curiosity, it was quite easy to accumulate. In fact, it weighs me down now thinking about it. You know, this just this vast storage of information. And now I had to learn several things along the way. Discipline, and by discipline, of course, I want to talk about self-discipline. Some kind of system. And this is system that I want to talk about. So here I am, just accumulating. This went on for the first at least 33 years of my life was just accumulating. I had to be exposed to, I had to read this and I had to read that and I had to just hoard. Because for some reason I thought information had value. And it's only till I started learning the practice of discriminating, and discriminating by assigning different levels of value to different information. And this is the process that I always start with. So you accumulate, and then you begin sorting. And I love to sort, I love to sort. It's just the natural process of me seeking some order out of chaos. It's been the skill of sorting. So I started categories. started sorting this information. And when I'm saying, I'm talking about physical information that I accumulated through resources, through sources, but also at the same time, I was always constantly bombarded with other cosmic sourced information. So it's always in tune to that. So external and internal, both were getting overwhelming. So then I thought, okay, I think that's where you start. When you go into chaos, the first thing you try to do, if you're looking for order, it's elusive. It's an elusive prey, by the way. It's an elusive state of mind is order, because everything is prone to chaos. We find ourselves participating in a chaotic world. It's a little bit overwhelming, don't you think, at times? If you really let it get to you, you either have to put some distance between you and the chaos, probably create a safe space is probably a good place to begin. And then I always visualize, I have these little guys, their job was sorters, kind of like you look at you watch some of the movie with high tech, and they just show all the little minions working at their little computer, clicking, clacking away, and that's kind of an updated version of how I would see things, how I would visualize, because visualization, seeing things, was always a big part of my process. And I've told you before that I still to this day cannot truly distinguish between what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling. Maybe I see the feelings. It's very blurry for me. It's strange. That may sound strange. It may sound quite comfortable and familiar. For me, it's like putting on an old pair of shoes. It's just comfortable. Visualization is just comfortable. Seeing is such a reassuring and prevalent use of my natural born resources. And when I talk about resources, I'm talking about the senses primarily. So I have this background, if you can just picture behind me, minions. The deplorables. I love that. Minions. Little yellow minions typing away at their computer. And what they're actually doing is categorizing, sorting. I always like the Dewey Decimal System. I use libraries to date myself when it wasn't done on, nothing was done on computers because they didn't exist. At least the personal computer, PC didn't exist, and mainframes. But that was way behind my pay grade. So, typewriter. Yeah, typewriter. I even began my university career typewriter. And then having corrective tape and all the things maybe you don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's like how useful is for you to use a landline anymore, that we actually had to dial the numbers and then modernized to push buttons, and never mind any of that. It's lost its relevancy, a good thing too. So there's my minions. Sorting, categorizing. And again, it's kind of hit or miss, discriminate, depends on what was on my mind at the particular time. I give them tasks. I say, okay, you guys, let's work on this one now. This is too big. Let's start trying to organize it. So that's what I came to call sorting. So you had to locate it, you had to find it, then you had to sort it. So there's my minion just sorting for me, because when I say that, it's really, it assumes the level of tasks that really don't take your concentration, your mind. Really, it's almost like breathing in the heartbeat. It becomes to that level of automatic. Because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't think. I couldn't walk. I couldn't because I pictured just this physical realm of reams and reams and reams and volumes of pages containing most times random information, because that's how I absorb. It's a random process for me. Things come to me and I recognize, oh, that's a keeper. They put that in the folder, put that in the, I didn't even have any folders really. I just put that in the pile. So it's been a long time, if you can imagine, sorting. And then discrimination or relevancy. What was relevant? So first you had to sort it all, to organize it and say, I have these big giant columns to the sky of pages and, like I said, reams of paper. But at least I had them in columns, okay? And then I'd be systematic, which at times I can be, because when it serves my purposes, I can be very systematic. Although my tendency is towards randomness. That's the monkey mind, random thoughts. Even my spiritual mind with the big M was so curious that, and so much wanted answers for the questions. Even though the questions were not that numerous, I didn't have that many questions. My basic spiritual questions were rather finite in number. So especially considering the infinite possibilities of concepts, questions that one could have in the spiritual process. Mine was always, who am I, what am I, why am I, where am I? Who, what, why, when? Who, what, why, when, where, and how. Those are the basic tools of starting the conversation, interestingly enough. So this started my process of sorting. Okay, so my minions did this work for me. It all sorted in piles, and now what? So, relevancy, usefulness, even a little bit of practicality, which again, is against the grain. I lean more towards practicality than practicality. I just want to be a rebel, sorry. Always been a rebel. So everything's counter. Most people do it that way. I want to do it this way. This was not a conscious process. This is very much internalized. This was very much me. Well, if everybody else did it this way, I want to try this way. So then became the consume. So years and years consuming, accumulating, all kinds of random stuff. And then became the process of sorting it. As I mentioned, now I had piles. Now what? Well, I had to start discriminating. This is discriminating. Is this just a random pondering? Or is this have any useful information? And when I say useful information, at that time I'm talking spiritual. Does this contribute at all to my big 6 questions? The 5 W's and the H. Does this accumulate to, is this necessary for my betterment on my path of self-improvement? And this is where discipline started taking, learning what to discard, what to keep. And it's really interesting that I'm at this stage of my life again with physical things. I've had 4 or 5 times in my life when I've left somewhere with a suit, literally with one little suitcase in my hand, coming to Taiwan. Every time I've moved in Taiwan, so it's been at least 12 times. And so there's losing stuff, but physical things. But now we're talking about, so this was just necessary to survive. And I'm at a state now where I'm just thinking, it's time to start paring down again. I hope I don't have to move again. Although I envision at least one more move where I'll be in my ideal. I'm very close. I'm living larger than, living better than I ever have in my life. With the house that I'm in. This is the best house I've ever lived by far. Everything about my life right now is better than it ever has been. Which is a nice place to be. But now I'm looking to, it's good to dream. I'm a dreamer. And I just envision myself on something, on a cliff overlooking that ocean. Panoramic. I need wide open skies. I need to walk down a path and be in the sand or even the rocks. Be right where the ocean meets the land. I need to be, but farther enough removed, up looking down, I think, because just for some protection of the ravages of the ocean, the typhoons that we have here, the high tides and the low tides and the winds, and I still need a sanctuary, So who knows? Who knows? But meanwhile, I'm perfectly content. But I do want to start paring down physically, okay? But that's just an aside, okay? The heart of the matter is this random accumulation of information. So I start sorting, and it's by relevancy. How relevant? Does this contribute to the things I need to know to get closer to satisfying my spiritual inquiry? And again, my minions, they help. They chatter amongst themselves, and then they would just throw it aside. It was always my job somehow. This is my contribution physically, as I had to, metaphorically then at least, I had to gather up all this useless information and be the one that actually incinerated it, discarded it, put it in the trash truck, however. Whatever metaphor serves me at this point. Get rid of it. So eventually I had piles, 3/4 to 7/8 of the stack was gone because it was just information that was basically useless because it didn't contribute to what my end game was. And my end game was discovering hoping that it'll contribute to the discovery. And then I looked and I said, okay, this is knowledge. Now, knowledge, I spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours through my higher education to acquire knowledge. And knowledge is different than information in that only because it's assigned its relevancy is higher because it's more important to what my pursuit is. So now I've got 1/8 to 1/4 of my stacks as knowledge. Now I turn to my minions that are so helpful with accumulating and sorting. And now they've left me. The work is mine now. Thankfully I dismissed my minions. I said, thank you, minions. There's other people that you can go do something else for somebody else, but thank you, minions, for all your hard work. And I'm left with these stacks of, and again, it's not systematic, it's not organized. It's just separated into, it took that leap from information to knowledge, and it's only a self-constructed sense of value. It was valuable information for me that was to become knowledge. And then the real work began, because of course I was looking for the gold, right? I was looking for wisdom, because in this wisdom was the ultimate source of the outward world's contribution. Be it Maya, be it illusion or not, the contribution was no less real, whether it's made up or it's there. So this a more refined sorting process. So the sorting process entailed 3 steps. The wheat from the chaff. Getting to the kernel. Taking knowledge and sorting and saving the wisdom. And the pile is whittled down, right, to a manageable size. Because I would suspect the gap from knowledge to wisdom is about 10-1. 10 knowledgeable things, but when all is said and done, there's only 1 wisdom. I would say it's closer to 100-1. Okay. So all I'm saying is that this was a visualization. It seemed real to me, just like any visualization takes on a sense of reality. Now I had wisdom. But again, it's kind of random pile, so it's time for consolidation. And here's the tricky part. It came time, I've got to store it. And storing includes, you have to develop a system. Like I told you, I like the Dewey Decimal System in libraries. And I used to use the file cards. You go to a big stack and you look for the file card. And there'd be a 3x5 card with the publisher, the relevant information, and it had a call number, and then you go look. Well, that became computerized, and the process became simpler because it was digital manual. It was digitized. So you look up the computer, one single computer took the place of huge file cabinets. But it was still the Dewey Decimal System, the way that it was stored, how you take a number and how you locate it in the library. I love that. So I hired a librarian. I dismissed my minions, hired a librarian. And the librarian's job was to store this nuggets, the wisdom that a lifetime of work had accumulated. So it had to be stored. And because we're dealing with this, it had to be stored up here. And because this is finite, at least as we know it, until we plug into the infinite, which is the next step. But my little librarian had to go and find and source and find this information. So he had to store it, and he had to get on a little ladder and climb up, and he had to go get it and bring it to me when I needed it. And this system worked fine for me, but then as I became more spiritual adept, as I made progress towards unity, towards remembering the forgotten, I had an epiphany. And this is the most important takeaway. I had an epiphany, a sudden enlightenment, a sudden understanding, when I realized that, first of all, everything that has been, will be, and is, which should cover everything, known in this universe, is available right now. Everything that will be, is, and has been known are all accessible. I retired my librarian, okay? But knowing this, that I had access, and this was part of actually took place during the whole journey, those last few days to abide in awakening. Then I realized that anything, here it is, when I need to know it, I will know it. If I don't need to know it, I don't know it. But I'm talking about real time, and especially doing these videos. I stumble on a word, I forget a concept. Usually I'll be able to get it quickly, but there's no pressure. I don't panic. I have no panic left, no anxiety, no panic, no worries, no cares, no problems. And as I need to know it, there it is. But it took this whole process to get me to the state where I understand it's all available.